getting back on to why most of you all signed up for this Patreon, A Song of Ice and Fire. So it would be very unideal for me to do. Well, you know what? We're going to start. Okay, so Theon's first chapter in the Clash of Kings. I'm going to be discussing that in this episode of the podcast. If you all want me to continue with the next chapter that happens after this one, well, that would be Daenerys, right? So basically, I've reread A Song of Ice and Fire 7 times. Right now, I'm on the Clash of Kings, Daenerys' second chapter, right? So if, I just skipped around a bunch to get my, brain ready for this episode. So anyway, I'm at the very beginning of Clash of Kings. So if you guys want me to break down what I think are the most interesting chapters in the Clash of Kings, then let me know. Now, the reason why I say the most interesting is because not every single POV would be worthy of an entire episode of the podcast. Right now, the episodes are shorter, yes, but that's because I feel like that works better. Not everyone would have time to sit down and watch like an hour podcast that was uploaded once a week. So I figure shorter segments multiple times a week is better. But if you guys think different, let me know down below. So one of the things to note about this chapter is that this is not just Theon's first POV, right? This is not just Theon's first chapter in A Clash of Kings. It's his first POV chapter in general, right? So he doesn't have any in Game of Thrones. And George does that a lot, where he'll set up a character in a book, and then in the next book, that character has a POV chapter. One of the perfect examples of that is Theon Greyjoy. Now, King Robb, right, when he's crowned King of the North, is told by his mother, Catelyn, who's a POV. Robb Stark is not a POV, but Catelyn Stark is, right? So Catelyn tells Robb, her son, please keep Theon by your side. Send anybody else to the Iron Islands except for Theon Greyjoy. And Robb goes, why, mother? Why would I send anyone other than King Balon's son? Or he's not King Balon yet, but why would I send anyone other than the Lord of the Iron Island's son to go and treat with him? Because basically Robb wants to bring the Greyjoys into the fold, have them bring the Iron Fleet onto his side and help fight the Lannisters and, take back the North and just get vengeance for his father's death. And ultimately, as a reward for this, Balon will be able to crown himself again King of the Iron Islands. Now, that's something that was wiped out when Aegon the Conqueror came over. Obviously, Aegon's not going to allow people to name themselves king. Like, from the day that Aegon crowned himself, he told everybody, yo, I'm the only king here. Westeros is ruled by one king. So, obviously, he killed Harren the Black, burned Harrenhal, and he was, in fact, King Harren the Black was descended from mostly Ironborn men, right? But when his son comes back, his son doesn't necessarily claim to be king of the Iron Islands, or I guess it's his grandson. I'm getting way too sidetracked there. But anyway, ever since that moment, when Aegon came over, so there's no more kings, but one king in Westeros, the Iron Islands have had no king, right? And one of the things they used to do was rape and reave. They were bloody pirates, right? So they would find... the thing with the Iron Islands is the Iron Men themselves, and I've talked about this before in this podcast, the Ironborn initially were thought to be first men, but they worship the drowned god, who has one opposition, the storm god, and the religion and the distinctness of their culture makes people think that some of the Maesters, think that the Ironborn themselves are descended from a different group of people altogether that were in Westeros before the First Men. So, the Sea Stone Chair, the Driftwood Crown, these things are just links to a greater society and culture. So not only did Aegon the Conqueror end the Ironborn men from being rapers and reavers and pirates and pillagers, but he also ended the old way, their connection to it. So basically, when this story, the main story, is being set up, and you also got to realize that the reason why World of Ice and Fire is so in-depth and why I think it's so amazing is because George actually wrote it in 2014, obviously years before that. It was published in 2014, but he wrote it after most of the books for the main series have already come out. So the fact that he put this information that is clarified in World of Ice and Fire just shows you that he was thinking so far ahead. Like, these books are genius, right? So when George wrote all this backstory, for instance, being a Star Wars fan, when I watch, the prequels and then the most latest ones, when a mistake happens, I immediately go into my own headcanon and make up things as to why, a certain character appears when they should have been dead, right? And retconning things and all that good shit. So George's books are so well written that he doesn't actually have to do that. He laid the groundwork in these early books for this information to be explained. So getting way back on track here. Theon is sent by Robb at the end of a Game of Thrones to go and treat with his father to bring the Greyjoys into his side. But remember, Catelyn Stark, the POV, tells Robb not to do that. She knows that it would be a terrible idea to send their one and only hostage, the one reason to keep Balon loyal to them, to send him away, right? To send Theon to go treat with his father is extremely stupid because they no longer have a hostage that would keep the Ironborn in line. So King Balon has no reason to listen to Robb anymore because guess what? Robb returned his son. And you got to realize that Theon was a hostage because the Iron Islands had rebelled before, right? After Robert's rebellion, Ned Stark was sent there to put down the Greyjoy rebellion because they were acting goddamn fools like they always do. And to get Balon to, not act like an asshat anymore, Ned was like, yo, give me your fucking son and he's coming back with me to Winterfell. Now, what's interesting is that Theon thinks back what his life is like at Winterfell, and although Ned 100% wasn't a dick to him, he was still very much aware that he was a hostage, and Theon was 10 years old, so he's old enough to know this is his home, right, in the Iron Islands, Pike, Great Wick, right, he grew up there in the salt and sea and the ocean, right, he was a seaman. We're all seamen, right, but then he still ultimately remembers and hates part of him hates the fact that Ned Stark took him away from his childhood home. And even though Ned was somewhat fair to him, he still was aware that he was a hostage. It's interesting. He thinks about how Robb is a younger brother to him. He does love Robb. He thinks about that, but also how Breanne and Arya and the rest of the kids, right? So Rickon, were so tiny for the most of the part that he was there. He doesn't really have that strong of a connection to them, which comes up later when Theon takes Winterfell and pretends to kill Breanne and Rickon, right? To, name himself Prince of Winterfell. What's interesting is that, like I said, he thinks of Robb as a brother, but also he realizes that Jon was treated better than him. Even though Jon's a bastard, Theon is of a higher birth, right? Theon's parents were both Greyjoys. They were married when they had him. Theon is a lordling, right? Ned still treated Jon better than Theon. So that's part of the reason why Theon hates, starts to hate the Starks and Ned and just that situation in general. It's like the longer he stays away from the Starks on that journey, right? Because Robb sent him away to go and treat with his father to bring the Ironborn back to his side. The longer he's away from the Starks, the more he realizes, oh shit, I'm free now. There's not a Stark in sight, right? He says shit like that. He thinks shit like that. But then ultimately he thinks fondly of how, like for instance, his sister Yara on the TV show, but Asha in the books, named her ship Blackwind. Robb has a direwolf. King Robb Stark of the North has a direwolf named Greywind, and he links the two. He's like, oh, we're both windy people, right? He's like, it's interesting. My sister named her longship Blackwind, and Robb named his direwolf Greywind. He links that, and he's thinking of similarities in between the two of them. But then ultimately, when he gets to the Iron Islands, he's not greeted by his father, right? There's no big welcoming party. The Ironborn are hard men, right? They don't really give a fuck about the fact that Theon's there, even though he's been gone 10 years. They don't give a shit. Balon is not down at the docks waiting for him. There's not this great party ready to receive him, right? It's just who he finds out is his uncle. So it's kind of an interesting point of view to get from that. But I'll come back to that in a second. What happens when Theon is on this ship is that he basically... Wow, excuse me. That was extremely loud. Wow, what a great audience. Sorry about that. So when he's on the ship, he does, something that the Greyjoys are quite famous for. Raping and reaving, right? He basically tells the captain... he doesn't tell the captain shit. He persuades the captain's daughter to start fucking him. And when he does this, he thinks back like he's already fucking him. He's not fucking the captain. He's fucking the captain's daughter. But he's already doing that when the the POV chapter starts, and he's reminiscing and thinking back about how the first time when he did that, the captain was obviously hot and pissed off, but ultimately his rank being a Greyjoy and being, sent from King Robb in the north, the captain couldn't really do shit about it. And he also promised the captain a fat lord's purse, but he's sort of, big dick energy and with the captain's daughter, and he's telling her like, look, you'd be my salt wife, and I need a rock wife as well. I could make you, basically he's just trying to get her wet. You know what I mean? And she feeds into it. He thinks of how she looks. She has a stupid look on her face. So in the TV show, Dan and Dave literally picked someone. I think the actress was actually a porn star, but they picked someone who just looks simple, right? So Theon just is trying to get his dick sucked. You know what I mean? He's just trying to basically make the best of his situation to get as much ass. He's obviously manipulating the crap out of him just to make. Don't get it wrong when I'm making light of the situation. It's terrible. But also, this is make-believe, so none of this actually really happened. So Theon is like, yeah, he's like, yeah. She ends up saying things like, please take me with you when you go. I could work in your kitchens. I'd be the best kitchen wench. I love kitchens, right? Because she's basically, living on a ship. She's a captain's daughter, and she just goes from this port to that port, never really settling down, right? So she's trying to convince Theon, who she knows is this lordling, the son of Balon, right? She's trying to convince him to take her with her. So Theon's like, oh yeah. And then Theon's like, you know what? I'm getting tired of hearing this bitch's mouth. Let me put my cock in it, right? So he convinces her to to suck his wiener, right? And he's thinking about all these great things that he could do. Remember, this is before he even gets to shore. This is while he's on his journey. The chapter is about an hour on Audible. It's 58 minutes on Audible. And when you read it, I think it's 40 pages or something. So it is quite a lengthy chapter. But when he's still at sea, right? So he's getting sucked off by the captain's daughter. And while she's doing that, right, he's like, her mouth is as wet as her pussy, right? George is a fucking hornball. It's insane. If I was in jail and I didn't have any porn to watch, I would take the Song of Ice and Fire books with me so that I would have constant jack-off material from all these explicit sex scenes that happen in the books. Some of them, when Theon's getting sucked off by the... Anyway, he describes what it's like to be inside of a woman really well. So continuing on here, Theon, while he's thinking, what he's thinking about while he's getting head, right? On the ocean, he's like, I could be king of Casterly Rock. I could be. The voice that Roy Dotrice does for Theon and Asha and Balon, they're all really, really, really good. The voice that he does for Theon in particular is perfect, right? He's like, I could be king of Casterly Rock with all my gold, right? And then he's thinking about the old ways and how, he potentially is away from all the Starks. He gets to carve his own path. He gets to do his own thing. And then all of a sudden, his climax comes on him like a storm, right? And then the girl, the captain's daughter, tries to, get away. But he's like, nah, I think not. And holds her down. Oh, my God. George wrote this, not me. I'm just reacting to it, right? So, right, he's not expecting it, then he comes in her mouth, right, and he forces her to swallow, right, and she goes, it tastes salty, and he goes, like the sea. It's hilarious to me, but I'm sure not everybody thinks it's funny from that perspective, right? So, anyway, he gets ashore, she tries to go with him, it's funny how Theon thinks of himself. When she tries to cling on to him, and he's, in front of, his uncle and other people at the port, when he comes off, he's having people go and get his shit. And finally, she comes up and she's like, please take me with you, right? This is the girl that he just busted inside, right? So she's like, please. And he's when she runs up to him to grab him, he thinks about how he deftly moves aside. So Theon thinks the world of himself. And it's hilarious because he's doing all this shit to his daughter, right? Sorry, not his daughter, the captain's daughter, right? And then when he gets ashore, all that shit kind of happens to him, but mentally, right? So no one's there for him. No one's waiting for him. He doesn't have this huge reception thinking that he's gone for 10 years. He's going to have the Kraken himself, right? Balon Greyjoy's father come down and meet him, and it's going to be a big party, right? That doesn't happen. He gets smacked in the face with that. Kind of the same thing he does to the captain's daughter on the ship, right? So he meets with Aeron. Damphair is his uncle, right? When Theon left the Iron Islands 10 years prior to that, the person that he remembers, Aeron Damphair, his uncle being, was a party dude. He has this fond memory of his uncle Aeron standing on a table, drunk as fuck, singing reaping and raving songs and raping and just being a a cheerful Ironborn lad, but when he comes back 10 years later, his uncle's this fucking upstuck, asshole-ish type of character, right? So he's not expecting that. And when he journeys with his uncle on his way to Pike to go, meet with his father, right? After he arrives on shore from being sent there from Rob, right? Along the journey, he talks with his uncle. He starts opening up to him, and he's like, Uncle Aaron, why are you not the same person that I remember? And Aaron tells him, the salt water washed that away, and the fish ate the scales off my eyes, to quote him verbatim. And Theon thinks of that, well, oh shit, this old man is as crazy as he is fucking lordly, right? So he's as crazy as he is uptight as he is lordly. So he doesn't think much of who his uncle has become, right? But it tells Theon, and the whole theme of this chapter is that, because it's in specific, he asked Aaron, his uncle Damphair, right, this priestly guy who used to be this party drunk, he asked him, what all has changed here? And Aaron says, like, women still die in childbirth, the winds are here, people still eat fish and die, people still mine and die. Basically, that part of the island has changed, or has stayed the same, right? So the whole theme of that POV is Theon thinking that the Iron Islands are going to be this one way, how he remembers it, but it's actually different. But it's still the same. Like, that part of the Iron Islands is still the same. It's still, people still live and die. Women still die in childbirth and are in pain, right? People still, sail the ocean catching fish, right? All that's the same, but all of the people have changed, right? So his uncle, Aaron, was this completely different person 10 years prior. So that's a really big theme in this chapter. So eventually, they're making their way up the hill, right? And what happens there is that, the conversation sort of continues, right? But he finds out that, mostly, like I was saying, no one really respects him. Ultimately, when he gets to Pike, he starts to tell the story of how it looks, right? It's these great keeps that are connected by bridges. We've all seen Pike, like, remember where Balon is killed by Euron on that bridge? All of the keeps, like, there's 5 keeps, I believe, on Pike, and they're all connected by those bridges. Some of them are covered by sheltered passes, but for the most part, it's this crazy looking thing that you never, you kind of get a mental image of it, but that's one of the things the show's done amazingly, is that they showed us visually, okay, this is what George is describing in the book. So anyway, Theon, while he's walking on these bridges, he remembers being a kid, like 10 years prior, and he would fly across the bridges. He would go fast as shit, not thinking about nothing, but that's one thing. He's now changed, right? So remember, he's like looking to see what's the same, what he remembers, but he realizes that he himself has changed because he's not so stupid and uncautious as to why he's, running across these bridges like he did when he was a child. He's gained wisdom over the years, right? So we find out, he thinks that he's going to go back to his old chambers, and I'm just kind of drawing off a memory here. I ran off my notes, or I ran out of what I had for my notes. But he thinks he's going to go to the Seastone Tower where he slept at as a kid, but that doesn't happen. He goes to the Bloody Keep, and he remembers how that got the name. Basically, the river kings of old, 1,000 years ago, had their children chopped up, and pieces of them were sent to their fathers on the mainland. Then ultimately, he goes and meets with his father. And as soon as he meets with his father immediately knocks him down. And Theon's been getting knocked down a peg by every single person he runs into, right? So his father's like, did you pay the iron price for that fucking gold chain you're wearing, you Nancy boy? And he's like, I paid gold for it. And when what his father Balon means, what Theon's father Balon means when he says, did you pay the iron price, is basically, did you kill someone and then take that off their body as a reward, right? So what's interesting is that Theon thinks about how when he killed his first wildling, when Breanne is trapped in, let me go way back here. When Robb Stark is still at Winterfell, before he starts to go down south, before Ned is in prison, so this is when Ned is still the Hand of the King, Robert Baratheon is still alive. For the most part, everything is still good in Game of Thrones. Bran has broken legs, but he takes his pony out. So the saddle was designed by Tyrion. Then Bran is able to ride a pony again. He takes the pony out, dancer with his brother Robb and Theon to the Godswood. Obviously, there's a few other men with him, but Bran ends up getting separated, and wildlings fall on them. one of the wildlings, right, ends up working for them in service, like in the TV show. But Theon ultimately kills one of the other wildlings with his arrow. And he thinks like, oh, I could have took something off of that wildling that I killed, and then I would have paid the iron price with it, right? So his father asks him as soon as he gets there and he sees how lordly his fucking son looks. He's like, hey, did you pay the iron price for that fucking chain there, boy? And Theon's like, no, I bought it with gold, like a normal person would do. I didn't kill someone and take it from him. So his father snatches the chain off of him, and that immediately knocks him the fuck down. So his father tells him in this conversation, like, okay, why are you here, kind of, right? And then Theon explains to him, Robb is going to give you, keyword, give you a crown. He needs your long ships to go and raid the Casterly Rock, the Lannisters' homeland, raid Lannisport, Casterly Rock, lay siege to it, and start attacking the Lannisters, making them freak out, making the war for Robb easier, right? And all that he has to do is basically send his longships to go and raid the undefended Casterly Rock, which is fairly close to the Iron Islands, right? And he'll be given a crown by Robb. But if you'll remember, Balon doesn't like to be given shit. He doesn't like to give gold to someone else for things. He likes to kill the person and pay the iron price, right? So he's like, any crown that's given to me, Balon says this to Theon, any crown that's given to me can also be taken away. So Balon's not fucking down for that. So what ends up happening, right? So remember, Theon is sent there to bring his father onto King Robb's side, fight for the North, raid Casterly Rock, lay siege to Casterly Rock. Theon propositions his father to say that, hey, this will be my reward. I'll lead the mission myself. You can sit here, Father King Balon, potentially, if you go and follow Robb's orders, right? I'll do all that myself. I'll just reward myself the key to the seat of Casterly Rock. And Theon thinks, like, that's fair. You know, I'll get a bunch of gold and titles and all this shit. And then his father puts a halt to that and says, like I mentioned, any crown that's given can be taken away. So he's like, I'm rallying my longships. We're gonna start a war. I'm gonna name myself king, but not by taking Casterly Rock. He mentions how Tywin is too clever, and also Casterly Rock has never fallen. So he says, I'm going to pick something that is a fruit, but not as juicy as Casterly Rock. But it is equally undefended and a lot easier to pick. It's a lot riper. It's basically he tells Theon, I'm going to carve out my own kingdom. And then before Theon could even ask him what he's talking about, Theon thinks and realizes he's referring to Winterfell. And that's right when the chapter ends and picks up with Daenerys after her dragons were born. So if you all want more, well, let me know down below. You know what? You don't got to let me know down below because this is Patreon, baby. You're going to be getting more. I want to thank you all so much for listening. And hopefully this made up for the lack of content. I do have some personal stuff going on right now. In short, my girlfriend's aunt is on hospice. She's like at the end stage of COPD. So that, along with the holidays coming up, and then also YouTube's ranking system with the algorithm, like they've attacked my latest videos. They've got like 2,000 views. I just have been trying to spend a lot of time making my content as good as possible for YouTube, and then also trying to study up for podcasts like these. Hopefully this was very informative, and you now know what Theon's first POV was like. Thank you for listening, and along that, the readers was the Ixos Daor.